She posed as the cold tech CEO's wife to comfort his sick mom, but he ended up falling in love. Kendra's hand shook as she signed her name. The ink was still wet when Owen's voice dropped to a whisper that sent heat racing down her spine despite everything. Have you ever had to pretend to be someone you're not? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She held the check for $50,000 in her trembling hands, knowing that accepting it meant lying to a dying woman. But refusing it meant watching her own son go without the surgery that could save his life. The executive's suite smelled of leather and ambition, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Seattle's skyline like a monument to power she'd never touch. But the man behind the mahogany desk wasn't looking at his empire. He was studying her like a problem to be solved. Owen Caldwell didn't smile. Hell, Kendra wasn't sure he even knew how. His gray eyes cut through her like surgical instruments, cold and precise. She'd seen him fire 3 people this month without blinking. Now he wanted to hire her for something that made her stomach twist. Your son needs heart surgery, he stated, not asked. His voice carried the kind of authority that moves stock markets. The insurance won't cover experimental procedures. Kendra's throat tightened. Marcus was 8 years old. 8. And this stranger knew more about her medical bills than her own family did. I need a wife for 1 weekend. Owen continued, sliding the contract across polished wood. My mother is dying. She wants to meet the woman I'm going to marry before she passes. The numbers on that check could change everything. Marcus could get his surgery. They could keep their apartment. She could stop working 3 jobs just to barely survive. But the way Owen watched her sign made her hyper-aware of everything. Her secondhand scrubs, the way her pulse jumped when he said the word intimate, how his expensive cologne made the air feel thicker. 1 weekend in Montana, he said quietly, you play the devoted wife. I pay for your son's surgery. Her pen hovered over the signature line. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about crossing a line she'd never thought she'd even approach. Have you ever been so desperate you considered doing something that went against everything you believed in? What would you sacrifice for your child? Tell me in the comments. Owen's assistant knocked once, then entered without waiting. Your flight to Montana leaves in 4 hours, Mr. Caldwell. Kendra's hand shook as she signed her name. The ink was still wet when Owen's voice dropped to a whisper that sent heat racing down her spine despite everything. One more thing. My mother can't know this is fake. That means you'll need to convince her we're intimate. The word hung between them like a dare. She met his stare, refusing to look away even though her cheeks burned. How intimate? She asked. His answer made her question everything she thought she knew about cold, calculating Owen Caldwell. Intimate enough that she believes I'm capable of love. The private jet's leather seats cost more than her annual salary, but it was the way he watched her buckle her seatbelt that made her feel like she was worth a fortune. 30,000 feet above America, the clouds stretched endlessly white while they sat in golden silence, practicing lies that felt increasingly dangerous to speak aloud. Tell me about your childhood, Owen said, his laptop balanced on his knees like a shield. Even at cruising altitude, he couldn't stop working. What? Kendra pulled her cardigan tighter. The plane's luxury felt suffocating rather than comfortable. Because my mother will ask. She asks about everything. The weight of their deception settled heavier with each mile toward Montana. Kendra had lied before, small lies, survival lies. But this felt different. This felt like stepping off a cliff. I grew up in Atlanta, she began carefully. Single mom, worked 2 jobs. Nothing special. Owen's fingers paused over his keyboard. And Marcus's father? The question hit like a slap. Not in the picture. My mother will want details about how we met. Kendra shifted in her seat, accidentally brushing his arm. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and from the way his breath caught, he felt it too. We could say we met at the clinic, she suggested, trying to ignore how his cologne made her think of things that had nothing to do with business arrangements. Too clinical. His voice carried an edge she couldn't identify. She'll want romance. The plane hit turbulence, and Kendra's grip automatically found his forearm. His muscle tensed under her touch, solid and warm, and completely at odds with his cold businessman persona. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Her hand on his arm, his gray eyes suddenly darker, the space between them charged with something that definitely wasn't in their contract. Romance, she repeated, her voice smaller than intended. Owen cleared his throat and gently pulled away, but she caught the way his jaw tightened. She believes in fairy tales. Always has. And you don't. His laugh was bitter. I stopped believing in fairy tales the day I learned that love is just another transaction. Everyone wants something. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and she glimpsed something broken underneath all that wealth and power. Have you ever had to pretend to be someone you're not? How did it feel to step into a different version of yourself? Share your experience below. When the pilot announced their descent into Montana, Owen reached for her hand without thinking. His palm was warm, calloused in unexpected places that spoke of a life before boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. She's going to ask how we fell in love, he said quietly, thumb tracing over her knuckles in a way that felt dangerously real. Kendra's heart hammered against her ribs. This was supposed to be acting. Simple, straightforward pretending. But the way he touched her, the way his voice softened when he mentioned his mother, nothing about this felt simple anymore. What should we tell her? He asked. Her answer set everything in motion, though neither of them realized it yet. The truth always works best, she whispered, not pulling her hand away. We just won't mention which parts are real. Lorraine Caldwell took one look at Kendra and smiled. Not the polite smile of first meetings, but the knowing smile of a mother who'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. The hospital room glowed with afternoon mountain light, medical equipment humming quietly around a woman whose eyes still sparkled with the fierce intelligence that had raised a tech empire's heir. So you're the one who finally caught my impossible son, Lorraine said, her voice weak but warm. She patted the bed beside her. Come here, dear. Let me look at you properly. Kendra glanced at Owen, who stood frozen in the doorway like he'd forgotten how to move. His mask of control had completely cracked the moment he saw his mother, smaller than Kendra had imagined, frilier, but with an energy that filled the room. Mom, Owen's voice cracked on the word. This is Kendra. I can see that, sweetheart. Lorraine's laugh turned into a cough. Though you could have warned me, she was so beautiful. I would have put on lipstick. Heat crept up Kendra's neck. This woman was dying, and she was lying on her face. The weight of their deception felt crushing. But when Lorraine took her hand, something unexpected happened. The touch was gentle, maternal, everything Kendra had missed since her own mother passed 5 years ago. Tell me everything, Lorraine said, her grip surprisingly strong. How did you two meet? How long have you been together? I want every detail. Owen stepped closer, his hand settling on Kendra's shoulder. The touch was meant to be supportive, part of their act, but the warmth that spread through her had nothing to do with pretending. We met at the clinic, Kendra began, sticking to their rehearsed story. I was working late, and he came in to check on the new equipment his company donated. And it was love at first sight. Lorraine's eyes twinkled. Not exactly, Owen said, his thumb stroking Kendra's shoulder in a way that made concentration impossible. She told me the coffee maker was broken and I should fix it myself if I wanted decent coffee. Lorraine burst into delighted laughter. She did not. She did. Owen's voice carried genuine amusement now. I'd never had anyone talk to me like that. The story wasn't true, but the way he told it, with affection and surprise, made Kendra's chest tight. This was how he should always sound. Not cold and calculating, but warm and human. I knew immediately, Lorraine said, squeezing Kendra's hand. The moment Owen mentioned you, I knew you were special. He's never brought a woman home before. The words hit like a punch. Never? In 32 years? Have you ever instantly connected with someone's family member? That moment when you realize you could genuinely care about them? Drop a heart if you felt that instant bond. You'll stay in the guest room, of course, Lorraine continued. It's small but cozy. Perfect for newlyweds. Owen went rigid beside her. Mom, we don't want to impose. Nonsense. I insist. Lorraine's tone brooked no argument. Besides, I want to spend as much time as possible with my new daughter. Daughter. The word wrapped around Kendra's heart like a warm blanket and a noose at the same time. As they unpacked in the small guest room, one bed, floral wallpaper, the kind of intimate space that would make their charade impossible to maintain, Lorraine's voice carried through the thin walls. She's perfect for you, sweetheart. But Owen, her voice dropped to a whisper Kendra could barely catch, but the words froze her blood. Does she know about Victoria? She woke to find his side of the bed empty and the sound of muffled sobbing coming from the hallway. The kind of pain that only emerges when you think no one is listening. The Montana night pressed against the windows, stars scattered across the darkness like scattered diamonds, while inside, two strangers shared a space smaller than his Seattle office bathroom. They'd managed the sleeping arrangements with awkward politeness. Him offering to take the floor, her insisting they could share the bed like adults, both of them hyper-aware of every breath and movement in the darkness. But now, at 2 a.m, Owen was gone. Kendra slipped from under the covers, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. The hallway stretched dark and narrow, lit only by the glow from the nurse's station down the corridor. She found him outside his mother's room, shoulders shaking with the kind of grief that comes from watching someone you love slip away piece by piece. He hadn't heard her approach, his forehead pressed against the doorframe, one hand flat against the wall like he needed the support to stay upright. Owen! He spun around, and in the dim hospital lighting, she saw him completely unguarded for the first time. His hair was disheveled, his expensive t-shirt wrinkled, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and tears. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." She stepped closer, close enough to smell his skin beneath the cologne, close enough to see the way his chest rose and fell with shaky breaths. "How long has she been sick?" 6 months. Maybe longer. His voice broke on the words. "She didn't tell me until last month. Said she didn't want me to worry." The pain in his voice cut right through her. This wasn't the cold CEO who'd hired her. This was a son watching his mother die, terrified and alone and trying desperately to hold it together. "You don't have to pretend with me," she whispered. "Not when it's just us." His response broke something inside her chest. "I don't know how to be real anymore." Without thinking, she reached for him. Her hand touched his cheek, and he leaned into the contact like a man drowning, grabbing for shore. "She's all I have," he said, his voice barely audible. "When she's gone, You'll be what?" "Alone." The word came out like a confession. Completely alone. Standing there in the hospital hallway, Kendra realized this wasn't just about money or surgery or even his dying mother. This was about a man so isolated by his own success that he had to pay someone to pretend to love him. Her thumb traced along his cheekbone, wiping away tears he probably didn't even realize he was shedding. When was the last time you saw someone powerful show their vulnerability? How did it change how you saw them? Tell me your story. "We should go back," he said finally, but he didn't move away from her touch. They walked back to their room in silence, the weight of his confession hanging between them. When he finally returned to bed, his phone buzzed with a text that made his face go white in the screen's glow. Kendra caught just one word before he deleted it: Victoria. The way his hands shook told her everything she needed to know. This weekend was about to get complicated. But as he settled back under the covers, careful not to touch her, she found herself wishing he would. The man who'd cried in a hospital hallway wasn't the same man who'd hired her. This version was real, broken, human, and that terrified her more than any contract ever could. She wasn't supposed to open his laptop, but when Lorraine asked to see their engagement photos, Kendra discovered Owen had been keeping more than one secret. The morning had started innocently enough. Owen had gone to meet with doctors, leaving Kendra alone with his mother, who was having one of her good days, alert, chatty, and dangerously curious. "I want to see pictures," Lorraine announced from her hospital bed, eyes bright with maternal interest. "Owen mentioned you two got engaged recently. I want to see everything. The proposal, the ring, all of it." Kendra's stomach dropped. They hadn't discussed engagement photos because there weren't any. Their fake relationship had a gaping hole where real memories should be. They're on Owen's laptop, she said carefully, hoping to buy time. Well, get it then. It's right there on the chair. The laptop screen illuminated years of lies, charity galas and vacation beaches. Always the same blonde woman at Owen's side. Always the same empty smile that never reaches eyes. Victoria. It had to be Victoria. Photo after photo showed Owen with a woman who looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Polished, perfect, everything Kendra wasn't. At award ceremonies, family gatherings, intimate dinners. A whole life Kendra knew nothing about. Those are beautiful pictures, dear, Lorraine said from behind her. Kendra spun around, laptop still open, caught red-handed with evidence of Owen's deception within their deception. But Lorraine wasn't looking at the screen with confusion. She was looking at it with sadness. That's Victoria Sterling, Lorraine said quietly. Owen's ex-fiancée. The words hit like a physical blow. Ex-fiancée, not ex-girlfriend. Ex-fiancée. I was wondering when he'd tell you about her, Lorraine continued, settling back against her pillows. Though I suppose some things are easier to show than explain. He was engaged? Kendra's voice came out smaller than intended. For 2 years. Beautiful wedding planned. Guest list that read like Fortune 500. Victoria had everything mapped out perfectly. Lorraine's tone carried an edge that hadn't been there before. Everything except genuine feeling for my son. The laptop showed another photo. Owen and Victoria at what looked like an engagement party, his arm around her waist, her diamond ring catching the camera flash. They looked perfect together, made for each other. When did they break up? Kendra asked, though part of her didn't want to know. 3 months ago, right before I got sick. Lorraine's eyes found Kendra's. She left him the day after his company's stock took a hit. Funny how love disappears when the money gets tight. 3 months. Owen had been broken up for 3 months, and he'd hired Kendra to pretend to be his wife. The timeline made her stomach churn. She hurt him badly, Lorraine said softly. I hoped he'd never trust anyone again. But then he mentioned you. The door opened, and Owen stepped in, coffee in hand and exhaustion written across his features. He took one look at the laptop screen and went completely still. Kendra, he said carefully, what are you looking at? Your ex-fiancée. She closed the laptop with more force than necessary. The one you forgot to mention. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed how you saw a situation? That moment when you realized nothing was what it seemed? Share below. Lorraine cleared her throat. I think I need a rest now. You two should talk. The moment they were alone, Owen moved toward her, hands raised like he was approaching a spooked animal. I can explain. Who is Victoria? The question came out sharper than intended. His answer shattered the careful distance she'd maintained. The woman I was supposed to marry. The woman who left me 3 months ago. The pain in his voice was real, raw, and it cut through her anger like a blade. This wasn't just about hiring a fake wife. This was about a man so broken by betrayal that he'd rather pay a stranger than risk his heart again. Before Owen could explain further, Lorraine's voice called weakly from her room, urgent and strained. Kendra, dear, could you come here? There's something I need to tell you about my son. The tone sent ice through Kendra's veins. Whatever Lorraine needed to say, it was going to change everything. Lorraine's fingers felt like paper as she gripped Kendra's hand, her voice barely a whisper. I know you're not really married to my son, but I need you to love him anyway. The hospital room felt smaller now, medical monitors beeping like a countdown, while outside the window, Montana mountains stood eternal and indifferent to human heartbreak. Kendra's breath caught in her throat. What? I've known from the beginning, dear. Lorraine's smile was sad but knowing. A mother can tell when her son is pretending. Owen's never been a good liar, especially about matters of the heart. Panic flooded through Kendra's system. If Lorraine knew, then everything was ruined. The contract, the money, Marcus's surgery, all of it crashing down because she'd been caught in a lie. Please, Kendra started, but Lorraine squeezed her hand. Hush, child. I'm not angry. Lorraine's eyes held a depth of understanding that made Kendra's chest ache. I'm grateful. Grateful. He's never brought a woman home, Lorraine whispered, her voice growing weaker with each word. In 32 years, You're the first he's ever wanted me to meet, even if he had to pay you to come." The words cut deep. Owen had been so isolated, so alone, that hiring a fake wife was preferable to admitting he had no one. "He's been hurt, you know," Lorraine continued. "Victoria destroyed something in him. Made him believe that love is just another business transaction." "Maybe he's right," Kendra said quietly. "Maybe that's all this is." Lorraine's laugh turned into a coughing fit that made the monitors spike. When she caught her breath, her grip on Kendra's hand grew desperate. "Look at me, dear." Lorraine's eyes were fierce despite her weakness. "I'm dying. I don't have time for polite lies or careful feelings. So I'm going to tell you something that Meg." The intensity in her voice made Kendra lean closer. "My son has never cried in front of anyone. Not since he was 7 years old and his father left us." Lorraine's voice dropped to barely audible. "But last night, I heard him crying in the hallway. And this morning, when he talks about you, his voice changes." Kendra's heart hammered against her ribs. "Mrs. Caldwell, he doesn't know it yet," Lorraine interrupted, "but he's already falling for you. The question is, are you brave enough to fall back?" The hospital room door opened, and Owen stepped in, bringing with him the scent of hospital coffee and something that might have been hope. "Everything okay in here?" His eyes moved between them, clearly sensing the tension. "Just girl talk," Lorraine said, but her eyes never left Kendra's face. "I was telling Kendra how happy you seem since you've been together." Owen moved closer, and Kendra was hyper-aware of his presence. The way he unconsciously positioned himself between her and the door, protective without thinking about it. "Mom, you should rest," he said gently. "I will." Lorraine's grip on Kendra's hand tightened one more time. "Promise me," she whispered urgently. "Promise me you'll give him a chance to be real. If a dying mother asked you to love her child, could you do it? Have you ever been asked to carry someone else's emotional burden? Tell me how it felt." Before Kendra could answer, the monitors started shrieking. Lorraine's body went rigid, her back arching off the bed as alarms filled the room with urgent, mechanical panic. Owen was at her side instantly, pressing the call button, his voice sharp with fear as he called for nurses. But Lorraine's eyes stayed locked on Kendra's, desperate and pleading, even as medical staff flooded the room. "Promise me," she mouthed silently. And in that moment, watching Owen's face crumble with terror, Kendra realized her answer had already changed everything. In the hospital waiting room at 3 a.m., with Lorraine fighting for her life behind closed doors, Kendra realized she was no longer acting. She was genuinely terrified of losing the woman who'd become her champion. The ICU waiting room lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on plastic chairs where two people who'd started as strangers now sat holding hand without thinking. Owen had been silent for hours, staring at the double doors that led to his mother's room. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, and his jaw was tight with the kind of control that came from years of refusing to break down in public. But Kendra could see the cracks. "She's going to be okay," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "Is she?" His voice was hoarse from hours of silence. "The doctors won't tell me anything concrete, just medical speak and carefully worded possibilities." His hand in hers was warm, calloused in ways that surprised her. These weren't the soft hands of a man who'd never worked. They told stories she wanted to hear. "You don't have to stay," he said suddenly, not looking at her. "The contract's fulfilled. You came to Montana, you met my mother. Whatever happens now." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung between them. If Lorraine died, their agreement was over. Kendra could go back to Atlanta, collect her money, and pretend this weekend never happened. "I'm not staying for the contract," she said. The word surprised them both. Owen's head turned, his gray eyes searching her face like he was looking for lies. "Then why?" The honest answer terrified her, because somewhere between his breakdown in the hallway and Lorraine's desperate confession, this had stopped being about money. This had become about two broken people finding something real in the middle of an elaborate fake. "Because she asked me to take care of you," Kendra said instead. It was true, but not the whole truth. Owen's laugh was bitter. I don't need taken care of. Everyone needs taken care of sometimes. They sat in silence as the night stretched on, her thumb tracing circles on his knuckles without her realizing it. His breathing had finally steadied, the rigid tension in his shoulders easing slightly. When he shifted in his chair, his head ended up against her shoulder. She should have pulled away. This wasn't part of their arrangement. But instead, she found herself stroking his hair, feeling the way he relaxed into her touch. She knew, he said quietly, about us, about the contract. I know. She wasn't angry. No, she wasn't. Have you ever found yourself caring about someone you never expected to? When performance became real feeling. Share that moment below. At dawn, the double doors opened. Dr. Martinez emerged, still in scrubs, looking exhausted but not devastated. Owen stood so quickly he nearly collapsed, but it wasn't exhaustion that made his knees buckle. It was the text message that had just arrived from Victoria. I saw the news about your mother. I'm coming to Montana. We need to talk. Owen stared at his phone, his face draining of color. What is it? Kendra asked, though the dread in her stomach already knew. Victoria, he said numbly. She's coming here. The one person who could destroy everything they built, fake or not, was about to arrive. And despite everything Kendra had told herself about contracts and money and keeping her distance, the thought of losing Owen to his polished, perfect ex-fiancé made her chest burn with something that felt dangerously like jealousy. When? She asked. Owen's answer hit like a punch. She lands in 2 hours. Victoria Sterling walked into the hospital like she owned it, designer heels clicking against linoleum, perfectly coiffed even at 6 a.m. Everything Kendra wasn't and suddenly wished she could be. The hospital corridor became a battlefield dressed in Prada and scrubs. Two women, circling each other with smiles that never reached their eyes, while a man watched his past and present collide. Victoria was stunning in the way that money could buy. Polished, refined, every blonde hair in place despite the early morning flight. Her cream-colored suit probably cost more than Kendra, made in 6 months, and she wore it like armor. Owen, darling, Victoria said, moving toward him with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything she wanted. Her manicured hand landed on his chest, right over his heart. I came as soon as I heard about Lorraine. Kendra watched Owen's face, looking for any sign of the man who'd cried in the hallway, who'd held her hand through the longest night of waiting. But his mask was back in place, corporate and unreadable. Victoria. His voice was carefully neutral. You didn't need to come. Of course I did. Lorraine practically raised me. Victoria's eyes swept over Kendra dismissively. And you must be the nurse. The words hit like a slap. Not even the courtesy of an introduction. Just the nurse, like she was part of the hospital equipment. I'm Kendra, she said, extending her hand. Owen's wife. Victoria's perfect smile faltered for just a second. Wife? How sudden? We kept it small, Owen said, and Kendra caught the way his jaw tightened. Family only. How romantic. Victoria's tone suggested it was anything but. Though I have to say, I'm surprised. When we spoke 3 weeks ago, you didn't mention being in a relationship. 3 weeks ago. The timeline hit Kendra like ice water. 3 weeks ago, Victoria had been talking to Owen. How long had they been broken up? Really? People change, Owen said carefully. Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Do they? Because the Owen I know doesn't make impulsive decisions, especially not about marriage. The territorial display was obvious now. Victoria wasn't here out of concern for Lorraine. She was here to mark her territory, to remind Owen of what he'd lost. Nurses are wonderful, of course, Victoria continued, her gaze sliding over Kendra's wrinkled clothes and tired face. But surely this was just temporary comfort during a difficult time? The dismissal in her voice made Kendra's cheeks burn. She felt suddenly conscious of her appearance. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing the same clothes she'd slept in. Some comfort isn't temporary, Kendra said quietly. It's just real. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Real? How refreshing. Though I suppose everyone has their own definition of real, don't they? The implication was clear. Victoria knew about the contract. Somehow, she knew this was all fake. Owen stepped closer to Kendra, his hand finding the small of her back. The touch was warm, possessive, and it sent heat racing through her despite everything. "Kendra has been incredible through all of this," he said, and something in his voice made Victoria's perfect composure crack slightly. "Have you ever felt like you didn't belong in someone's world? When insecurity made you question your worth? Tell me how you handled it." A nurse approached their small group. "Mr. Caldwell, your mother is awake and asking for you. All of you." Victoria moved first, her heels clicking with authority as she headed toward Lorraine's room. But when they reached the doorway, Lorraine's reaction wasn't what anyone expected. Her eyes landed on Victoria, and her face went cold. "Get her out," Lorraine whispered, her voice carrying a strength that belied her condition. "Now!" Victoria's perfect mask finally shattered. "Lorraine, I don't understand. I said get her out." Lorraine's voice grew stronger with each word. "I won't have that woman in my room." But the damage was done. Owen had seen Kendra's face when Victoria kissed his cheek in greeting, had witnessed the way she'd shrunk under Victoria's polished assessment, and the hurt there would change everything. She found Owen on the hospital roof at midnight, staring at city lights below, and realized this was the moment he would choose between his comfortable past and his terrifying present. Montana spread below them in glittering darkness, the hospital roof offering sanctuary above the chaos, where two people could finally speak without an audience. Owen stood at the railing, his white dress shirt rolled up to his elbows, tie long since abandoned. The mountain air was cold, but he didn't seem to notice. "I wondered where you'd gone," Kendra said softly, stepping out of the stairwell. He didn't turn around. Needed air, space to think. About Victoria? His shoulders tensed. Among other things, Kendra moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, but not touching. The city lights below twinkled like fallen stars, beautiful and distant. "She's beautiful," Kendra said, though the words tasted bitter. "Yes, she is." The simple agreement shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. But Owen continued, his voice quiet and thoughtful. "Beautiful, polished, perfect. Everything I thought I wanted." He finally looked at her, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before. "But she never made me feel like I was worth saving." "Owen, do you know why I really hired you?" He turned to face her fully, his hands gripping the railing behind him. "It wasn't just about convincing my mother I was happy. It was about convincing myself I could feel something real for someone." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. "And do you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Feel something real?" Instead of answering, he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with something purely him. "Victoria wants to get back together," he said. She made that clear today. Kendra's heart clenched, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. Yet." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "Because I needed to know something first." "What? If what I'm feeling is real, or if it's just gratitude for playing a part?" "When did you know the difference between going through the motions and feeling something real? That moment when everything shifted?" "Share your experience." The space between them crackled with tension that had been building since Seattle. His thumb moved to trace her lower lip, and her breath caught. "This isn't part of the contract," he whispered. "I know," she breathed back. "That's why it matters." When he kissed her, it wasn't gentle or questioning. It was hunger finally unleashed, months of careful distance dissolved in the space of a heartbeat. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she responded with a desperation that surprised them both. This wasn't the polite, careful touching of their charade. This was raw, honest, real. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him down to her, and he lifted her onto the ledge, stepping between her legs in a way that made her gasp against his mouth. "Kendra." He said her name like a prayer, like a promise, like something precious he was afraid to break. "I know," she whispered, understanding what he couldn't say. That this changed everything. That there was no going back to pretending after this. His forehead pressed against hers, both of them breathing hard, both of them trembling with the magnitude of what they'd just admitted without words. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we stop pretending," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "and start figuring out what's real." They made their way back inside, hands linked, both of them knowing that everything had shifted. But Victoria waited by the elevator, her smile sharp as broken glass. "I hope you enjoyed your little moment," she said to Kendra, her voice dripping false sweetness. "Because tomorrow, Owen's mother's going to learn exactly who you really are." The threat hit like ice water. Victoria had something, evidence, information, leverage. Something that could destroy not just their fake marriage, but any chance of something real. Owen's hand tightened on Kendra's. "Victoria, don't what? Don't tell the truth." Victoria's laugh was cold. "Oh, darling, the truth is exactly what this situation needs." Victoria's revenge came wrapped in hospital records and bank statements, proof that Kendra Miles was nothing but an expensive actress hired to comfort a dying woman. The hospital room felt like a courtroom, evidence scattered across the bedside table while 3 women sat in judgment of one man's desperate deception. Lorraine held the contract in her trembling hands, reading every word with the sharp intelligence that had built a business empire alongside her late husband. Owen stood frozen in the doorway, his face ashen as his carefully constructed world crumbled. $50,000, Lorraine read aloud, her voice steady despite her condition. "For services as a companion and intimate partner for 1 weekend." Victoria sat in the visitor's chair like a queen holding court, perfectly composed despite the destruction she'd unleashed. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Lorraine, but I felt you deserved to know the truth." Kendra wanted to disappear. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far away from this humiliation as possible. But Lorraine's eyes found hers across the room, and what she saw there wasn't anger. It was disappointment, and somehow that was worse. "Is this true?" Lorraine asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Kendra could lie, could try to salvage something from this disaster, but the evidence was right there in black and white. "Yes," she whispered. Owen moved then, stepping forward with his hands raised like he was approaching something fragile. "Mom, let me explain." "Explain what?" Victoria's voice cut through his words like a blade. "That you were so desperate you hired a prostitute to play house." "She's not." Owen's voice cracked with fury, but Lorraine held up her hand. "Enough." Her voice carried the authority of a woman who'd spent decades managing powerful men. "All of you be quiet." The silence stretched taut as piano wire. Outside, Montana Mountain stood witness to another family crisis, indifferent and eternal. Lorraine looked at the contract again, then at Victoria's smug face, then at Owen's devastated expression. Finally, her eyes settled on Kendra. "I've known from the beginning, Victoria," Lorraine said calmly. "What you don't understand is that the best lies are the ones that become true." Victoria's perfect composure cracked. "What? Did you think I was fooled by expensive clothes and rehearsed stories?" Lorraine's laugh was weak, but genuine. "I raised a son who thinks love is a business transaction. Of course you would hire someone to play the part. Have you ever been caught in a lie that started with good intentions? How did you handle the fallout? Tell me your story below." "But the question isn't whether Kendra was paid to come here," Lorraine continued, her eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "The question is why she stayed when she didn't have to." Kendra's breath caught. Lorraine was right. She'd stayed through the medical emergency, through Owen's breakdown, through moments that had nothing to do with their contract. "She stayed because she cares about him," Lorraine said softly. "And more importantly, he cares about her. I've seen how he looks at her, how he touches her when he thinks no one is watching. That's not something you can fake." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. Owen, surely you can't be serious about this arrangement." But Owen wasn't looking at Victoria. He was looking at Kendra, his eyes holding a question she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. "The contract is fulfilled," he said quietly. "You can go home. Take the money, get Marcus's surgery, and forget this weekend ever happened." The choice was laid out clearly. Take the money and run, or stay and fight for something that might be real. Kendra looked at the contract on Lorraine's bedside table, then at Victoria's expectant face, then at Owen's careful, hopeful expression. Her answer would change everything. "I can't take the money," she said. "Why not?" Owen asked. "Because this stopped being about money the moment you cried in my arms." Victoria's gasp was audible, but Kendra ignored her. She moved to Owen's side, taking his hand in full view of everyone. "Your mother asked me to promise something," she said, looking into his eyes. "She asked me to give you a chance to be real. So that's what I'm doing." As they faced Victoria's fury together, Owen's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and Kendra's blood turned to ice. Something had happened to her son. Something had happened to her son. She rushed back to Atlanta to find her son in surgery. But the man who appeared in the hospital waiting room wasn't supposed to be there. Owen had followed her across the country. Marcus lay unconscious in the pediatric ICU, his small chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. Kendra pressed her face against the glass, watching machines keep her 8-year-old alive while doctors worked to repair what genetics had broken in his heart. The surgery went well, Owen said quietly behind her. "I spoke with the cardiac surgeon. Full recovery expected." She turned, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "You weren't supposed to come. Neither were you." His suit was wrinkled, hair disheveled. "You were supposed to stay with my mother. Your mother told me to go." Kendra's voice cracked. She said Marcus needed me more than she did. Owen stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with airplane coffee and exhaustion. She was right. For 3 days, they took shifts in the waiting room. Owen learned to work from plastic chairs, fielding conference calls while Kendra slept against his shoulder. She watched him charm nurses, convince doctors to explain procedures twice, and somehow make hospital vending machine coffee taste better just by bringing it to her. "You don't have to stay," she whispered during one of their midnight vigils. "The contract's done. Your mother got what she wanted." Owen looked up from his laptop, eyes bloodshot but determined. "I'm not here because of the contract." "Then why?" He closed the laptop, giving her his full attention. "Because when I got that call about Marcus, I realized something. I wasn't scared about losing the $50,000 or disappointing my mother. I was terrified of losing you." The words hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. "Owen," she started, "I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. But somewhere between Montana and here, between pretending and..." He gestured helplessly. "This isn't pretend anymore, Kendra. At least not for me." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. The caller ID made his face tighten. Victoria Sterling. "Don't answer it," Kendra said. "She's been calling for hours." "Then she can wait." Kendra reached for his phone, powering it off. Some things are more important than your past. When Marcus woke the next morning, groggy but smiling, the first thing he asked was who the man sleeping in the chair next to his mom. "That's Owen," Kendra said carefully. "He's a friend." Marcus studied Owen with the brutal honesty only children possess. "He looks like a dad." Owen's eyes met Kendra's across the hospital bed, and something shifted between them. Something real and lasting and terrifying. Have you ever had someone show up for you when you needed them most? When they had no obligation but came anyway? Tell me about the person who proved that love isn't about contracts, it's about choice. But their peace was about to be shattered. As Owen helped Marcus with his breakfast, Kendra's phone lit up with news alerts. Victoria hadn't just been calling. She'd been talking to reporters. By noon, their story would be front-page news. The headline read, "Tech Billionaire's Fake Wife Scandal." But what hurt wasn't the exposure. It was seeing their most intimate moments reduced to calculated deception. Desperate single mother takes $50,000 to play grieving son's girlfriend, the article began. Photos of them at the Montana hospital, stolen shots of their hands intertwined, even Marcus's school records, all laid bare for public consumption. Kendra's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside Atlanta General, turning Marcus's recovery into a media circus. The nursing staff had to escort them through service hallways just to reach his room. "This is my fault," Owen said, pacing the small family lounge. I should have protected you better. From what? The truth. Kendra held up her phone, showing him the trending Twitter hashtag. Hashtag fake wife scandal. Look at what they're saying about me. The comments were brutal. Gold digger. Fraud. Poor kid deserves better than a mother who sells herself. They don't know you, Owen said fiercely. But they know enough. She scrolled through endless judgment. I took money to lie to a dying woman. That's the story. That's all anyone will remember. Owen stopped pacing. Is that really what you think happened? Isn't it? He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. You comforted my mother in her final days. You gave her peace. You helped a broken man remember how to feel. If that's fraud, then every good thing I've ever received has been a lie. Marcus called from his bed. Mom, there are people with cameras outside my window. Kendra's protective instincts flared. That's it. I'm calling security. No. Owen stood up, jaw set with determination. I'm calling a press conference. Owen, you can't. Watch me. 2 hours later, Owen Caldwell stood before a wall of reporters, microphones, and cameras. Kendra watched from Marcus's room, her son's small hand in hers. You want to know about Kendra Miles? Owen's voice carried the authority that had built his empire. She's the strongest person I've ever met. A mother who works 3 jobs to keep her son healthy. A woman who agreed to comfort a dying stranger because she understood what it meant to love someone more than yourself. The reporters shouted questions, but Owen raised his hand for silence. Did I pay her? Yes. Did she agree? Yes. But what happened between us? What's happening between us? That's not business. That's not performance. That's real. He looked directly into the main camera. Victoria Sterling broke our engagement 3 months ago because she said I was incapable of genuine emotion. She was right. Until I met Kendra, I didn't know what real felt like. Kendra felt tears streaming down her face. So publish your stories. Call a scandal. But know this, Owen's voice dropped, intimate despite the crowd. The best things in my life started with the worst ideas. And I'm not apologizing for finding love in unexpected places. Have you ever watched someone defend you publicly? When they chose your truth over their reputation. Share a time when someone fought for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. As Owen walked away from the podium, his phone buzzed with a call that would change everything. Montana General Hospital. Lorraine had taken a turn for the worse. Lorraine Caldwell waited until they were both holding her hands to whisper the words that would bind them together forever. Take care of each other. That's not a request, it's a mother's last wish. They've flown back to Montana immediately, leaving Marcus in the capable hands of Kendra's sister. The ICU felt different this time, quieter, more final. Machines hummed with resignation rather than hope. I saw your press conference, Lorraine whispered to Owen, her voice paper thin but eyes still sharp. About time you learned to fight for something real. Owen squeezed her hand. I learned from the best. And you, she turned to Kendra, my beautiful, stubborn daughter-in-law. Did you really think I'd let you walk away? Kendra's tears fell freely. I'm not your daughter-in-law. Not really. Nonsense. Lorraine's grip tightened with surprising strength. Family isn't about paperwork. It's about showing up. You showed up for him when he needed it most. You showed up for me when I was scared. That makes you family. The sunset painted the room in shades of gold and rose. Outside, Montana mountains stood eternal and patient, witnessing the end of one story and the beginning of another. I have something for you both, Lorraine whispered, gesturing weakly toward her bedside table. The drawer. Owen opened it, finding a small velvet box and an envelope sealed with wax. That ring belonged to my mother, and her mother before that. Real marriages, Owen. Lasting ones. Not like that cold arrangement you had with Victoria. Her eyes found Kendra's. It belongs to someone who understands what commitment means. Kendra stared at the simple gold band set with 3 small diamonds. Lorraine, I can't. You can. You will. The old woman's voice carried the authority of someone who'd raised a billionaire. Owen, asked her properly this time. No contracts. No conditions. Just love. Owen took the ring with shaking hands, then dropped to one knee beside his mother's bed. The irony wasn't lost on any of them, proposing in the place where their lie had begun. "Kendra Miles," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm not asking you to pretend anymore. I'm asking you to be real with me. Forever. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Kendra saw Lorraine smile, peaceful, satisfied, complete. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." Lorraine closed her eyes as Owen slipped the ring onto Kendra's finger. "Perfect fit," she murmured. "I knew it would be." They stayed with her through the night, taking turns reading her favorite poems, sharing stories about Marcus, planning a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. Near dawn, as Montana sky lightened to soft gray, Lorraine's breathing grew shallow. "Promise me," she whispered, gripping both their hands. "Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you'll let Marcus call you Dad. Owen. Promise me you'll be happy." "We promise," they said together. Lorraine Caldwell passed peacefully as the sun rose over the mountains, surrounded by the family she'd created through love and determination and one perfectly orchestrated lie. At the funeral 3 days later, hundreds came to pay respects. Business associates, longtime friends, neighbors who'd watched Owen grow up. But it was Marcus, standing between Owen and Kendra in his small black suit, who spoke the words that made everyone understand. "Great-Grandma Lorraine told me that sometimes grown-ups need help finding each other," he said in a microphone, his 8-year-old voice clear and sure. "She said she picked my mom specially for my new dad. And you know what? She picked good." When did you realize that some people come into your life to teach you how to love? Share about someone who changed your family forever, even if they couldn't stay to see the ending. But Lorraine had left them one final surprise. As they packed up her house, Owen found an envelope addressed to both of them, dated the day before she died. The first line made them both sit down hard. "My dearest children, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly." Lorraine's letter revealed the truth that changed everything. She had orchestrated their entire meeting, knowing her son needed someone real to save him from his hollow existence. "My dearest Owen and Kendra." The letter began in Lorraine's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. Owen, my brilliant, stubborn son. Did you really think it was coincidence that your company funded the exact clinic where Kendra worked?" Owen's hands trembled as he read aloud. "I've been watching you both for months. Owen, you were dying inside that glass tower, surrounded by people who only wanted your money. And Kendra, my brave girl, you were drowning trying to save your son alone." Kendra sank into Lorraine's old rocking chair, the weight of revelation settling over her. She knew everything. "I arranged the timing." Owen continued reading. "Your mother was always my greatest ally, Kendra. She mentioned Marcus's surgery needs during one of our phone calls. I made sure Owen's assistant would recommend you specifically. I even had your background checked. Not for dirt, but for confirmation that you were exactly what my son needed." The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing Lorraine's careful orchestration. How she'd instructed Owen's assistant to phrase the proposal as coldly as possible, knowing Owen would fumble it and make Kendra see his vulnerability. How she'd prepared questions about their relationship that would force them to be creative, to build something real from imagination. "But here's what I couldn't plan," the letter continued. "I couldn't make you actually fall in love. I couldn't force you to see past each other's defenses. I couldn't guarantee that what started as performance would become the most authentic thing in both your lives. That miracle, that was all you." Owen set the letter down, looking at Kendra with amazement. "She played us. She saved us," Kendra corrected. "There's a difference." The final page contained practical matters: a trust fund established for Marcus's education, ownership of the Montana house transferred to them both, and one last surprise. "I've started a foundation in both your names," Owen read. "The Miles Caldwell Foundation for Single Mothers in Crisis. The seed money is already donated. Your job is to make sure no mother ever has to choose between her dignity and her child's health the way I forced you to, Kendra. Turn your hardest moment into other people's hope." 6 months later, they stood in the Foundation's new Atlanta headquarters, watching Marcus color at a small desk while single mothers filled out applications for emergency assistance. No contracts required, no performance necessary, just help when it was needed most. Your mom would be proud, Kendra said, watching Owen approve another grant. Our mom, he corrected, pulling her close. She made sure of that in writing. That evening, as they tucked Marcus in a bed in their new house, a compromise between Owen's penthouse and Kendra's apartment, their son looked up with the serious expression he'd inherited from his mother. "Dad," Marcus said to Owen, the words still new enough to make Owen's chest tight with gratitude. "Great-Grandma Lorraine was really smart, wasn't she?" "The smartest person I ever knew," Owen agreed. "Good, because I asked her to find me a dad before she went to heaven. And she picked you." Marcus smiled with 8-year-old satisfaction. "She told me she would. Have you ever realized that someone loved you enough to interfere in your life for your own good? When meddling became miracle. Tell me about the person who saw what you needed before you did." As they turned off Marcus's light, Kendra's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the foundation announcement. "I was wrong about you both. Congratulations." Even Victoria Sterling had finally understood what Lorraine had known all along. Sometimes the best love stories begin with the worst ideas, orchestrated by the wisest hearts. 1 year later, she walked down the aisle toward the man who'd hired her to pretend to love him, knowing that everything fake between them had become the most real thing in both their lives. The Seattle venue overlooked Puget Sound, where water met sky in endless possibility. 200 guests filled white chairs on the waterfront lawn, but Kendra only saw Owen waiting at the altar, Marcus beside him holding rings with 8-year-old importance. No cameras this time. They'd learned their lesson about public scrutiny. Just family, friends, and the foundation clients who'd become their chosen community. Women who understood that love sometimes comes disguised as desperation, and that the best families are built from broken pieces made whole. Kendra's dress was simple but elegant, nothing like the designer gown Victoria would have chosen. This was hers, bought with foundation money, worn with pride earned through surviving their story. "You sure about this?" her sister whispered, straightening her veil. "It's not too late to run." Kendra laughed, thinking of all the times she could have run. From Owen's cold proposal, from Montana's complications, from the media storm, from grief that could have destroyed them. But running would have meant missing this. Marcus calling Owen dad, without hesitation, their foundation changing lives daily, love that had grown stronger through every test. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. Owen's eyes never left hers as she walked toward him. Gone was the cold executive who'd made that calculated offer 2 years ago. This man smiled like he meant it, cried openly during Marcus's ring-bearer speech, and held her hands like she was the answer to prayers he'd never learned to pray. "Friends and family," the officiant began, "we're here to celebrate Owen and Kendra, who've proven that the most authentic love can grow from the most unlikely beginnings. Their vows were simple, honest, free from corporate speak or performance anxiety." "Kendra," Owen said, his voice steady but emotional, "you taught me that strength isn't about control. It's about showing up, even when you're scared. You turned my worst idea into my best decision. I promise to love you not because I have to, but because I get to." "Owen," Kendra replied, "you showed me that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's a business proposal that changes your whole life. You proved that the right person will fight for you even when you try to walk away. I promise to be real with you, always. No more contracts, just us." When they kissed, Marcus cheered loudest of all. The reception was everything Lorraine would have loved: Montana wildflowers, Seattle seafood, Atlanta soul music, and 3 generations dancing under string lights. Owen spun Marcus around the dance floor while Kendra watched, hand resting unconsciously on her still flat belly, keeping the secret they'd share with everyone next month. "She would have been so happy," Kendra said as Owen returned, slightly breathless and completely content. "She is happy," Owen corrected, pulling her close for their first dance as husband and wife. "Somewhere, she's probably planning our kids' love lives already." Later, in their honeymoon suite overlooking the Sound, they made love with the patience of people who'd earned each other. No urgency born of secrets. No desperation fueled by time limits. Just a quiet celebration of choosing each other again and again until choice became habit and habit became home. No more pretending. Owen whispered against her hair. No more pretending, she agreed. But in the morning, Marcus would knock on their door, asking if he could call the baby brother or sister instead of step anything. And they'd realize Lorraine's legacy would continue through the family she'd created with one perfectly orchestrated weekend. The Miles Caldwell Foundation now helps over 500 families annually. Marcus, now 10, volunteers every Saturday, understanding that their hardest moments became other people's hope. And sometimes, late at night, Owen and Kendra read Lorraine's letter again, marveling at the woman who loved them enough to meddle them into happiness. So what would you do if someone offered you money to pretend to love them? Would you risk it? Would you be brave enough to let it become real? Hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Subscribe for more stories about love that conquers everything, even our own fears. Tell me in the comments, what's the most unexpected way love has found you? And remember, sometimes the best things in life start with the worst ideas, as long as you're brave enough to let them become beautiful. The most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about broken people who become whole together. What's your favorite unlikely love story? Share it below, and let's celebrate love in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms.